What's up, YouTube? Back here with another video. Not sure how long this one's going to be, but it'll be as long as it's going to be, as we're going to talk a little bit about the early thoughts here with not so much the election of 2020, but with some of the things that are going on out there in YouTube, with some things that people are saying on all different sides of the issue of voting and whether to vote or whether not to vote. But before I get going, I would encourage you to hit the subscribe button if you'd be so inclined to help bolster the community that we're trying to build here. And it's a slow process, as many of you know, in building YouTube communities, and every little bit helps. So if you would be so inclined to hit the subscribe button, that'd be great. If you would hit the notification bell, that would be even better to, again, help bring people to the conversation and help get things going here as we look to build this community here in YouTube. So back to some things that are going on here, and you'll see on the screen, you'll see a sign with choice pointing in two different directions, and that really is to symbolize what I'm going to talk about here today as far as voting and those who are out there in YouTube and elsewhere encouraging people not to vote, actively encouraging people not to vote. And many of these are people who are in the pro-black wing of the population, and this is really nothing new in terms of what many people in this community have been trying to do over the years. And you could see it really picking up steam with dissatisfaction that many of them were feeling with Barack Obama when he was president, and feeling like they weren't getting some of the things that they felt they deserved, and of course drawing the line in the sand and trying to create division by trying to pit people who were in favor of gay rights, people who had certain perspectives on immigration and illegal immigration issues. And it really is just kind of grown into something that's gotten more and more intense as we've gone along over the years, since Barack Obama has been out of office and Donald Trump has come into office as the president, and as we gear up toward the 2020 election, where things are only going to intensify, of course, as we now have a large slate of Democratic candidates vying to be the Democratic nominee to ultimately run against Trump to try to become president, try to make him a one-term president, and to get the Democrats back into the White House. Now, who knows what's going to happen with that? That's still quite a ways away here, as we're only at coming up on the midway point of the calendar year, as we're getting into July, actually past the midway point, I guess, technically, as we're coming up on July, the 7th month of the year. And one of the things that's just interesting to me is when you look at it, at people who are on the one hand lobbying hard for reparations, criticizing candidates for supposedly not having a black agenda, criticizing candidates for taking the black vote for granted, as if black people vote as a monolith, which they don't, and which most other races don't as well. Because many people in the pro-black sphere see the black vote as a monolith, they see maybe an opportunity to drive that wedge in there and to discourage black people from voting, because they don't see a candidate that's going to, in their words or in their minds, advance a spelled out black agenda. But what it really comes down to when you hear about a black agenda, it really comes down to reparations. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. And depending on what side of the fence you fall on, it's a complex issue. Well, I should say it's a complex issue if you are looking at it from a reality standpoint, in that you have people who, on the one hand, advocating for it, telling people not to vote for politicians that don't essentially favor reparations, but in asking the people that they're advocating not be voted for to support them in their bid to secure reparations. And not only the people that they would be most likely to support if they were going to vote, which would be the Democrats, but of course not supporting the Republicans, who are going to have to get on board if reparations is going to become any kind of a reality at this point, especially if you hear what Senator Mitch McConnell said when he was asked about reparations and the likelihood of that happening. And basically he said it ain't going to happen, which should be as no real surprise to anybody, because that's the way politics works. That's the reality of politics. And when you say we're not going to vote, which is perfectly fine, because as you see on the screen, it is about choice, and everybody should have their choice. But it should be an individual choice. And I think that's where people individually have to take a hard look at whether they are going to vote, and if they are going to vote, how they're going to vote. And it's something that takes careful consideration, because there's not always going to be perfect candidates. There's never going to be a perfect party. You're never going to get all the issues that you want to go the way that you want. When you get married, you're never going to find the perfect spouse. When you date, you're never going to find the perfect significant other. If you're in a relationship and you've never had a fight, then you've probably been in a relationship like, 2 hours? That's probably what it comes down to. In a family situation, you're going to have fights. You're going to have disagreements. You're going to have differences of opinion. It's only natural. It's human nature. There's going to be conflict. You're going to look at your family and say, we may not be perfect, but we're all we have. And that's why families tend to stick together through thick and thin, through right or wrong, through good or bad. And so it comes down to choices. And when you come in saying basically, we want to wipe away all choices for people, specifically the pro-black say, we want to wipe out all choices for black people. We don't want you to say, these candidates might not be perfect, but we need to pick the best of the lot to give us the best possible chance. If you're a fan of sports, let's say you're a fan of college sports, and you really are one of these fans that's really into it and you follow college recruiting, and you look at potential recruits, and even the best recruits, your 4, your 5-star recruits, they're not perfect, but they may be the best of the lot. They may not be perfect, but they're the best options that are out there. You're not going to get everything that you want every time that you go out and knock on a recruit's door. You talk to a recruit. You talk to a recruit's parents. They're not always going to be perfect, but you make the best of what you can with what you have in front of you. And that's the thing that people are going to have to really look at as they make their decisions about voting. And hopefully, I think if people feel so inclined that they go and do cast their votes, and they shouldn't feel pressured not to vote out of some non-specific movement telling people not to vote. because they're not going to get everything that they want. They're not going to get exactly what they want the way that they want it. That's to our detriment. That's to the detriment of all people. When you have dissatisfaction with government, the answer is not to pull back and withdraw. The answer is to organize, to lobby, to push, to engage. When they had the recent hearing on reparations, many of the commentators out there in YouTube were using all kinds of ugly racial slurs to attack some of the black people that were involved in that. And I get that there's disagreement with some people, especially some of the people who were opposed to reparations. But it wasn't limited to just that. There was also venom. There was heat in the direction of people who were even advocates of reparations because they weren't the perfect choice in the eyes of some to represent the argument. So even those who were advocating were attacked. So those advocating for were attacked. Those advocating against were attacked. So what are we doing? What are we advocating for? It seems almost that the advocacy is not so much for certain issues as much as it is for division, for polarization, for conflict. And many of the leaders of this division, this polarization, and this conflict have their own separate agendas. And what you have to ask yourself is, do you want to subscribe to that agenda? What's in it for you? What's in it for them? What are they trying to gain? What's their end goal? Demand specifics. Demand the specifics that they demand from the politicians on the black agenda that they want. Demand that they tell you what reparations looks like. Demand that they show you a path to securing reparations, a political path, because it's not going to happen without a political game plan, and even then it's still going to be a long shot. But you have a right to demand a level of accountability, a level of specificity that's going to turn some random talking points, some partisan talking points, into a reality that you can sink your teeth into. Because without those specifics, without a real game plan, it's just a bunch of talk. That's going to serve some people well to get views on YouTube, people that have built up large audiences, that have large followings, that are going to Patreon and making money, that are making money off of Google AdSense. And I'm not necessarily criticizing that. That's all well and good. But when it really comes down to it, we have to demand that people who are going to advocate for us not to use or exercise our rights, to give us specific reasons why they feel that way, and to give us concrete ideas and game plans for what these politicians are supposed to do. They're going to give us concrete details about what reparations looks like, about what other legislation that they're advocating for looks like, what it looks like, and how we get there. That's not too much to ask for. for anybody, especially those who want you to not exercise a right that many people fought for, that many of our ancestors died for, that many of our ancestors died wishing they had. We take it for granted now, but we shouldn't. If you choose not to vote, that's your choice. But to advocate for others not to vote is selfish. It's wrong. It's especially selfish and especially wrong if you can't come up with concrete reasons behind advocating people not to exercise their right. Come with the specifics. Come strong with the specifics. People deserve it. Otherwise, people should ignore it.